Okay.
Okay, good evening all. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Climate Change Working Group. I'm Councillor Anthony McEwen, Chair of the Working Group. I'd like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast to the internet via the Council's website and will be capable of repeat viewings. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed efficiently, can everyone please keep to the following guidelines for speaking? Councillors should only use the raise your hand function to request to speak and only speak when invited to do so by the chair. Please switch off your cameras and microphones when not speaking, and remember to set your mobile phone to silent for the duration of the meeting. Any views expressed by speakers in the meeting are the speaker's own and they do not necessarily reflect the view of the council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to be streamed live for 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in transmitting live. I'll now confirm the names of the remaining members of the committee. Councillor Pauline Bell, Angela Benham, Jane Benzer, Joanna Collins, Dom Elliott-Starkey, Simon Evans, Linda Gruby, Madeline Hall, Ian Huddleston, Pete Inman, Pam Reddy, Jill Scott and Jean Todd. We'll move on to the formal agenda now, starting with agenda item 2. Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have one apology, and that's from Councillor Pam Reddy.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on again then to agenda item 3. Any declarations of interest on matters before us this evening? Either disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests? None. Okay, we shall move on to agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I'll just go through them page by page, and if there's any points of accuracy or clarification needed, please plug them up. Alan.
Yeah, I was substituting for Pete Inman because I'm not a member of this illustrious body, but I always come anyway, and I'm sure you were here as well.
I'd hoped to have been here, yeah.
I'm here.
No. So the last we're on about the minutes of the last meeting.
Sorry, okay.
I was substituting for Pete last meeting, and I've noticed you're not on the list either.
Okay, with those minor amendments, are we okay with page 3? Then anything page 4, 5, and 6. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I take it those are acceptable as a record of our last gathering with those amendments. In that case, then we'll move on to agenda item 5, the draft annual report. We'll have an update on that from Gillian.
Good evening, everybody. So I've put some slides together just to run through this. So just do shout up if you have any questions. I'm just going to load it. Sorry, I thought it was later in the agenda. Okay. Share. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So as you all know, we do a report every year against the Climate Change Action Plan as it is published just now. So I'm just going to run through a few bits of stuff that we've done, some sort of ideas of how we might want to take it forward and things that we might collectively want to think about to, move things forward a bit, in a bit more of a comprehensive strategic way, bearing in mind we have lots of external things happening. As you all are very aware, we have the Borough Plan, which 4 out of the 5 priorities link very much into this plan in some way or another. Obviously, number 4 is very clearly climate, but also the future-proofing of housing is very much embedded in our plans in terms of energy and health and fuel poverty. Also, there's work around the adaptation, flooding, overheating, that kind of work as well. Healthier and safer. Healthier, obviously, if the houses are warmer, they're more healthy. So that links to that as well. So that was just to kind of align to that. And then, as you know, the climate change plan as it currently is has two parts. The first part being the operations, so that's us as a council and what we need to do to function. It doesn't include the housing stock, although I will cover that within this presentation. And then part two includes the operations and the borough, so it brings everything together into the one. And we have a net zero target for 2030 for all of that, which I'll come to. I think we're going to do right at the end of the meeting, aren't we? Talk about that. Oh, I seem to have frozen. Sorry. Yeah, so just as a quick reminder, this is the plan that I'm sure you're all very familiar with now, because I have it in every presentation. And there's 7 main themes. This isn't everything. This is just very high level of the different sort of actions that we need to try and achieve concurrently. Sorry, I don't know why that's not forwarding. So I'll start with the way we live. So this covers the energy performance of buildings, fuel poverty, domestic renewable energy. So when you see solar panels, etc. on buildings, obviously behaviour, buying of appliances, so people know what they should be asking if they have to replace their washing machine or whatever. And then there's funding for social housing and there's funding for privately owned low income houses. The homes that there isn't any funding for are the private, or there's not very much, is private rented, private owned when they've got the capital, and the privately owned with no capital and not low incomes, those people that fall in the middle. They earn a bit too much to get a grant, but they don't earn enough to be able to do the works that they might need to do to upgrade their houses. So following, I don't know if you recall last year, we had quite a bit of feedback from a few members of the public about we hadn't really talked about the social housing and what we were going to do with that. So I'm proposing that this year we pull in something with that. That is up for discussion with this group, obviously. The new EPC standard, which you may have heard of, has been scrapped, but that might get revoked. So that was for all rented properties should have an energy performance certificate C by 2025 for new rentals and 2028 for existing. So again, new government, that might change. And then there's just an average of about £7,500 to upgrade a property to a C is what's been estimated. So on this slide, you can see, excuse me, the sort of UK percentages of social housing and what bands they sit in. So A is the best, F is not. And at the moment, the legislation is it should be at least an E unless there's some sort of exemption, which there are a few. I won't go into that now. And then this blue box here, this is our stock in High Peak. So we have energy performance certificates for around 90%. So there's still another 10% that aren't factored in here. So as you can see, the majority are an E and above. So we're, pretty much compliant there. And we don't have any at an A, but things like the level C, we are below the UK percentage. So we're a little bit behind, but we're not miles behind. So that's good. So from those energy performance certificates of all those 90% of those houses, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. There's been recommendations that come back from those reports, and there's 11,000 single measures that have been identified that could bring those properties up that EPC rating. These have not been feasibly checked, they've not been cost checked. They're probably, some of them aren't very appealing to tenants, some might not be suitable. They might conflict with others because they're just single measures on a list. It's not a work programme. This is just the recommendations from that survey. So just before I show you that, this is not, don't fall off your seat when you see this. So this is a summary of the 11,000 measures. So from each survey, these are the measures that each house has identified that could help improve. It gives a pounds saving. That loft insulation number is incorrect, as I think I'll need to check that. And it also gives the carbon reduction that would achieve. So as you can see, there's a lot to go at. The sort of top ones are the low energy lighting, which we mentioned at our last meeting, and we've got a project for that. And solar panels or solar water heating, can't have both. So yeah, so there's quite a lot of information there of things that we could strategically try to look at to help that programme. So we've got two energy programmes at the moment. There's the East Midlands Mayoral Combined Authority. I think a paper was presented last night on this. So there's 40 properties in New Mills and Tinsel, signed up to have full retrofit completed. So that is now at the design stage. They've all been surveyed. So then what happens is the retrofit designer will talk through those designs and processes with the householder to make sure that they're comfortable and they understand what's happening. And I think we mentioned last time, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we're going to target social housing for those that need low energy lighting. The sheltered housing ones will be fitted by the building manager, obviously, just because, you know, for safety and accessibility. And then we're doing lots of communication and engagement around behaviour change and billing advice as well, because a lot of social housing tenants don't access that because they're not in a pathway to a grant. And with this funding, we can also offer home visits and small measures, so things like draft proofing and things that go behind the radiators, you know, the DIY sort of things. So they're happening now. For private housing, there's obviously lots going on as well. We completed LAD 3 in 2023. I think it was about 30 properties we retrofitted. There was no uptake of HUG 1, so that's the off-gas properties. But in the second phase of that, we have installed at least one measure, and we have been recruiting. So we're hopeful. I think the target is for 20 houses by March 2025. It's a lot of work for not a lot of return, really. It's not very fit for purpose as a funding mechanism. There's other funding that we need to set up the processes to access, which is not insurmountable. It's just a capacity to be able to do that and work with partners. We are working with the Local Authority Energy Partnership on the Heat Hub. And this is a demonstrator project to support the able or willing to pay. So those are the people that aren't the low incomes, to look at how they might retrofit their houses and how they might finance that as well. And there's other work going on around the financing, which I hopefully will be able to share more information with you later. We have put a bid in for some funding to look at that. There are discussions happening with the Department of Net Zero, Energy Security, Net Zero, around the next lots of funding. Sort of collectively through partners and consortium, we've been sort of lobbying to make it less difficult, because it is really obstructive for us to deliver and for householders to cope with all the upheaval and all the surveys and things. It's just a bit overly bureaucratic, really. And then the other piece is that it would be useful for private housing if we could, help develop financial products for them to be able to access, so low interest loans and things like that. So with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we have extra money for engagement. So we're working with Marches Energy Agency to deliver a really targeted and enhanced communications and engagement plan. So that'll be with the home visits that I mentioned for anybody those small measures, going to a lot more events, and like targeting, using sort of data to target certain areas, but also working in line with those other housing projects that are going on with the social housing. And that should hopefully lead to increased referrals through the existing funding programmes and build up a pipeline of projects there. This is the flyer that we've had developed. It's not quite finished yet, but this gives you a flavour of the branding that will go with this programme. So if you have any events or any of your surgeries, or you'd like us to set up a drop-in for coffee, cake, and we'll talk about your bills session, then this is an opportunity up until March to be able to do that whilst we have this funding and this capacity as well. So just around the sort of way we live, the housing considerations, we've got that priority in the borough plan. We need to think about how we respond to external funding, align all the different excuse me, the different strands of damp and mould, disabilities facilities grant, etc. What we need to have a strategy. Who does what? What's the priority? How do we resource it? You know, make sure that engagement and communications is really strong within that as well. We wondered whether it would be worth doing those energy performance certificates for that last 10% of the social housing. Don't know how much that would cost, I have no idea, but it feels like it's a good idea. We need to think about how we support those private rented tenants that have access to pretty much nothing. How do we help those homeowners without capital? And we have, touch wood, starting soon, a new domestic energy officer. So she will be overseeing all this going forward. She's got a lot of, she brings a lot of experience and skills with her, and she's very nice. So very excited about that. And we'll bring her, when she starts, we'll bring her to introduce her to you all as well. Any questions on that before I move to the next strand? Okay. Yeah, okay. So the next bit is the way we look after environment. I think Katie's here somewhere. We've got quite a few bits of this going on. We've had our nature declaration recently, which sort of sets out our stall for this plan for nature consultation. Katie will talk about later in the agenda. Biodiversity net gain. Katie and the other groups across the council have been working on how we set that up from a legal perspective and administrative perspective, but also to try and maximise the benefit from that to the borough as a whole. So make sure that we can use that funding very effectively or influence where we want those pockets of green infrastructure to be. The local nature recovery strategy is led by the County Council, but we're obviously an integral part of it. Wilder High Peak is what we're working with all the communities. As you know, there's some collaborative funding bids happening that hopefully in the future we'll be able to share with you. So just keeping those relationships open is really vital. We've got lots of really nice communications going out on social media as well. I think the comms team said that she actually really likes posting them because she doesn't get any complaints. She always gets very positive feedback from that. So I think that's a really positive thing to keep that ticking and going with different messages. We want to make sure that we're linking into other initiatives, move more, this work that AES are doing with their park rangers, you know, the friends of groups as well. I think all of you should have had an invitation to an online training module through the supply chain, sustainable supply chain school, something like that. So it's really good. It's an hour and it sort of covers biodiversity net gain and things to think about, when you're maybe reading reports and things to kind of feed that back and to help scrutinise that. And then the other thing we need to make sure we get right is the governance of all this. Like, where does it sit? How do we check that we're on track? You know, how do we make sure we're getting the most out of all of that as well? So yeah, so I've just mentioned considerations. So the governance obviously is important, making sure that we can, you know, find funding opportunities and budgets, making sure we're prioritising the right spaces, identifying projects and opportunities, and also being able to respond to these things quickly, because a lot of these funding opportunities, you don't have a lot of time. So we need to have things that are ready, things that we know we're allowed to apply for. So we need to kind of look at those, that governance of those projects as well. And also just making sure we've got the skills and capacity and resources to deliver those projects, but also to sustain them, to make sure that they're looked after for however long they need looking after until they're self-sustaining as well. Okay. So the next part is the way we make change occur. So that's through lots of different strands, but obviously there's a community fund, which you know about. There's other communications and engagement work that we do. We use our procurement principles to push up the sustainability up the supply chain. So as we're asking for things in contracts, companies will begin to sort of respond to those needs. We support businesses with new legislation, so things like new recycling that they have to have in next year after. You know, all our teams are working. Anybody who contacts businesses, you know, are working with them to make sure they're aware of it and how they can respond. And then the other thing is we need to identify issues and lobby government, you know, for things that we don't think are right. So for example, like that domestic energy grant, you know, it's so cumbersome, it's difficult. So we've used our sort of collective sway to to try and get that changed. Next. So the way we work, so this is about us as an organisation. We have had launched our electric vehicle salary sacrifice scheme, which is great. This is for staff. When they come to replace a vehicle, they can basically get a tax-free car. But we do have to figure out is where they're going to charge them when they're in the office. So that's just a minor issue. Obviously, we've got the on Buxton Leisure Centre, we've got the solar panels and the air source heat pumps. That's a real demonstration to everybody that, you know, that we're you know, we are definitely trying. And we have climate change and biodiversity on reports now. The induction climate change briefing included this diagram here on how to use donut economic principles. So that's when you're looking at reports or new policies and you need to try and think of all these things at the same time to see what influence they have on any of them. I've mentioned procurement. We've done some carbon literacy training for councillors. We've done a lot for staff. We've still to do some more for councillors, I'm aware. And we've got some new staff as well. So we'll probably be setting that up in the next few months. And we're also going to start asking our strategic partners to have their staff do either carbon literacy or the smaller FRESC version. And then I think just to highlight that we have a lot of partnerships that we learn from and can share good practice with as well. So I know that we've historically been very strong in that. Jean, do you want to ask something?
I was just wondering, with the EV salary sacrifice scheme, which company is that based with? Is it because I went to a seminar by a company called Tusker, which
I can't remember.
I don't know. Maybe Alan knows.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know if Alan. Don't think he's there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can find out for you. There is a link on the staff website that I think takes you to the.
Yeah.
I don't recognise that name, but it doesn't necessarily mean It's not that
Yeah,
long.
because I did ask Tanya about it, but she's not got back to me yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I think the things that I think we should consider in how we work is how to better embed the climate change and nature considerations into the scoping part of when projects and policies are scoped right at the start. I think that would make it a lot of stronger, and rather than getting to the end point and then being consulted. So I think internally we need a bit of a systems change on that. And also it will help us to maximise opportunities better, because we'll be able to see links with different strands of work across the council. And I mentioned this before, it's like making sure that we can respond quickly to opportunities, whilst obviously maintaining, you know, standards and protocols, you know, procurement, making sure things are signed off properly, we've got the right formalities in place, but it's just trying to respond to those opportunities. I think Jean's going to do a little bit on this, so I'll not spend lots of time on this, but the way we manage our waste is another strand of the plan. AES have been trialling new technologies for their fleet. They're mapping routes for their greatest efficiencies. So thinking about, you know, if you go around this estate before that estate, is there less mileage? Is the timings better? Are you not hitting, you know, certain pinch points at rush hour? That kind of thing. So I think they've got a company doing that for them just now. There's new legislation coming in, which will probably increase the number of routes, number of journeys that it has to do. So that obviously aligns in to, you know, quite a lot of the emissions. We've been supporting businesses with new legislation. So our environmental health officers and AES have been helping businesses respond to those new legislations. We're doing a lot of work on preventing fly tipping. Derbyshire County Council are just changed or are about to change some of their charging rules, so that might increase fly tipping. So we're trying to just preempt those potential issues. I think they might have changed the times of some of the opening hours as well. So yeah, so we're just trying to be proactive with that. And that's through all the comms and engagement work that obviously Jason came and talked about when he was here last time. And he talked about contamination stickers. They've also, we're getting a new website at some point, and I've kind of asked them to sort of change it so that it follows the waste hierarchy rather than just going to, we will pick this up. So it's not just about the operations, it's trying to encourage people to generate less waste and be more thoughtful of just not throwing things out if it's still usable, for example. And linking to that, supporting repair cafes, library of things, circular economy. We have done quite a lot of that through the community fund, climate change fund, but we were also using our social media channels to help advertise these local groups that are just doing fantastic things and can fix things that you never thought could be fixed, which is just wonderful. So this is for Joanna. These are the top two here. These are the current performance indicators within the climate change plan. I've added the bottom one, so this is now the total amount of waste across the borough, and then it's per capita. I think that's a good idea to have. Obviously, that's up to you as a collective if you want to keep that in. What I was going to suggest is that we change, because this is confusing when you get household and then capita, because obviously it's a different number. So I wondered if we changed residual waste to per capita, because I feel that that makes more sense. But again, that's up to you if that's what you want or not. I'll leave that open for you to think about. And I will get the previous, I'll try and get the previous figures for these as well if they're available, just so we've got a bit of a pattern there. So some considerations quite soon. The procurement for the fleet needs to be addressed. There's quite a long lead time with that, so there's quite a lot of, and obviously it's a big spend and it's for many years. Fleet is one of our top emissions, so there needs to be some conversations around what that looks like and how to prioritise the various demands on cost and emissions. With that, there's potential for the depots to be reconfigured to accommodate potentially the smaller vehicles charging with electric, or having HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil as fuel, because you need a tank for that. So yes, there's quite a lot to think about there, and I don't know how this group can engage with that, because I know there's the AES board, but that's maybe something to consider, how we can be involved in those conversations. The routes I talked about, the legislation changes. So this is to do with food waste. I think it's going to go weekly, so that will increase the number of rounds the vehicle has to do. And I've mentioned the Derbyshire changes to charging, and yeah, and the comms and engagement. We need to just get better at that stuff. I think there's a lot more we could think about the avoiding of the waste, not just the collection. Okay, oh, sorry, that's the same thing. And then just as a reminder, really, the Alliance has several services, obviously, but obviously climate change cuts across, and so does the nature work. So this is just really an overview of all the different strands of work that happen that link into this plan. And we need to make sure that all of the people that have responsibility for all of these bits are thinking with the climate and biodiversity in mind. And so that's something that we need to drive and make sure that it is actually happening. And so, and this is, excuse me. So this is the bit that, if you remember, in the annual report, I always do recommendations, or this is what's happening this year. So this is kind of what I know is happening this year so far, that might influence or impact our work. So obviously for part one, again, that's the operational emissions. We're getting two new heads of, we're getting a new executive director for place, who may have ideas that will change all of this. There's a new head of service for assets. Again, that's a very key person in delivering the decarbonisation of our buildings, including those social housing. That fleet strategy procurement, that will have a big impact for however long on our emissions. Again, the new waste legislation, put in public sector decarbonisation funding, just because there's another round coming up in October, so it's whether there's potential projects that we can put forward for that. And there's still the procurement strategy that we need to develop, the tools and training for managers and things to try and consider that when they're letting services or buying goods. And then for part two, the list is a bit longer. I'll bunch it together because that's very boring just to read that out. There's a lot of stuff going on around energy. As I mentioned, we're getting a new energy officer to focus on domestic, mostly private at first. But what I'd really like them to do is pull all those housing strands together, because there's people in different departments that deal with different elements of housing. So there's damp and mould, there's the tenant communication stuff. So it'd just be really useful to have a working group so we all can join up and you just be a bit more collaborative with that. So there's local area energy plan. We have funding for that. I'm not sure resource wise how much we'll need to put into it, but I'm guessing it's going to be quite a bit. The local plan obviously is going to consultation, so that'll have an impact. Lots of funding for staff. I mentioned the plan for nature. Depending on what comes out of that consultation and the actual to-do list at the end will obviously impact on what we're doing. We've got electric vehicle infrastructure. Although that's not our project directly, we need to engage with it and we don't have capacity, so we've got a bit of a problem with that. So we really need to think about how we can unblock that issue. I've mentioned all those things. We've got adaptation reporting. Now, this is a voluntary thing for local authorities. It's with DEFRA. But I do think it will become mandatory, so I kind of think we might as well start doing it voluntary and learn our mistakes. Quite a lot of councils are doing it, so we can sort of piggyback on the county and other boroughs as well. So this is about risk, identifying risk to our operations and to our communities, which I think is a really important piece of work, because that will all link into looking at regeneration for cooling or flood, management through natural management systems and things. So it could influence quite a lot of our decision making going forward. This is just emerging, the carbon disclosure project. Again, this feels like we might get pushed in this direction. This is big companies basically have to report to this their carbon emissions. So like I put our carbon footprint out in this report every year, it's just similar, except it's on a platform. And it pulls all the different sectors in. So I've got a few seminars coming up on that to see if it's something that we want to do. We've mentioned community engagement, and I've mentioned all that. I think, yeah, so I just think the other key thing is to just keep scanning, because there'll be so much new legislation and opportunities potentially coming around that we need to hopefully be ready to respond to those. Oh, somebody's got their hand up, sorry.
It's Pete.
Hi, Pete, sorry, I couldn't see you.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for putting the report together, Gillian. Oh, it's just a question around the EV charging points, because I feel that this is quite slow and disjointed in terms of the progress of it, and I believe that's to do with because the funding is with DCC. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the funding is with DCC. I think there's been some confusion with us about who is the contact for that, which has meant either 3 people turn up to a meeting or nobody. So we're kind of missing that, and there's resource that's needed that even if I went to those meetings, I wouldn't be able to do because I'm not in that service. So there's a block. We've got a blockage, and we're trying to resolve that. But
is there any scope for maybe a very, very small working group to help with this? Because I've got a community group in my ward who've been asking for a charging point at the car park, and they're in a very remote rural area for the last year really. And the things that you've raised there in terms of who do you contact,
yeah,
who's responsible, and
is it our car park?
It's New Mills Town Council who have said it's fine for us to do a survey on that car park, but I'm still not sure whether we've got a contract with any particular EV company, and these are the kind of questions that are sort of grinding down the process, if you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, well, so there's several bits. County have got what's called the Levy funding, and that is to help residents. So if it's a car park, they want it to be near, I can't remember what it is. It's like so many minutes walk from so many houses. Derbyshire were also looking to run, because they operate and manage their own streetlights, they were looking to run some through that as well. But certainly they would be the first port of call. I can send you the contact if...
That would be great. Thank you very much, Julian. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Cheers for that.
Okay. Joe?
Thanks, Gillian. Thanks for that. It's just so, there's just so much. And I think Pete's comment there about a small working group, I kind of feel that there's so many different areas here that small working groups would be really, really kind of beneficial, because there's so many different areas of kind of interest and expertise. And one thing that constantly disappoints me is that we don't say enough about public and sustainable transport. We're talking about EV charging points, but in terms of the way we work, buses are absolutely crucial, and we can get more buses. Kind of local groups have proved this. We've got BSIP money, Bus Service Improvement Plan. I know it's Derbyshire County Council, but we have the 61 bus that runs from Glossop to Buxton, and we've managed through different local groups, transport groups, campaigning, including kind of councillors, if you like, myself and our county councillor Anne Clark. We have got an extra bus each hour through this, and I just really feel that we've got to put buses at the heart of this, because not everyone's got and doesn't want electric cars. We're relying still too much on electric cars, and it's absolutely vital for the economy. I know I'm saying quite a lot, but I'm going to just finish this bit. Just for example, in our development control meeting on Monday, there's I can't remember the exact details, but there's a planning for a children's home somewhere in Buxton, and one of the problems is that there's no regular bus service. So there's how they're going to kind of put parking, etc. So it keeps coming up that we don't have enough buses, and we as a council need to have it. There's in that kind of Venn diagram, there's regeneration, sustainable transport's mentioned once, and I really think that, I mean, if we want, maybe it's only me, but shouldn't we have a working group on active and sustainable travel? It's vital for the economy, it's vital for climate change, and it just seems to be missed out. And you know, and I want it in there because it's so important, and it's winnable. There's money there. We know we can do it. We just need to commit to it. So it's a bit of a kind of rant, I'm afraid, but I feel very strongly about it.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think that's something that we as a group should think about, is having those smaller working groups, those task and finish type groups. But again, that's up to you as a collective to decide how we take this forward.
Something that, could I mention? I mean, I think it comes under the mayoralty now, the public transport, more or less.
Yeah, but still, Jean, it's part of...
Not quite yet.
But I would like to say that Buxton Town team, they have a small transport group which links in with DCC, and we go along to meetings, any presentations that they have. And they've been doing an awful lot of work on the sustainable transport side. And Hope Valley also have something similar.
It could be in our plans, Jean, I know, and Hope Valley have, Glossop have, we have in Hayfield, and lots of groups have, but it's so peripheral. We should have it in. If you know, I know it's not necessarily our remit, but we should be pushing it and mentioning it, at least in our plans. We don't mention it, and I find that astonishing.
Well, we have had presentations on these sort of things.
As you said, Councillor Scott, part of the reason why it doesn't necessarily focus more in our plans, because we're not the authority responsible for it. To a certain extent, we end up essentially like a consultee on a lot of transport schemes, with a county council that sometimes is willing to listen to us, other times not, unfortunately.
But we're going to have to do more, because we're going to have to kind of liaise with the East Midlands Mayoral Authority. We need a voice. When
it goes across to the Mayoral Authority, I suspect there will be a greater opportunity for input from us. But for the moment, at least, it is with our friends at Matlock. who are not necessarily always our friends. Joanna.
As I say, they have been
Yeah.
linking very well with the Buxton Town team.
I know, but
Yeah,
we're not
I
here.
must say, I think on sustainable travel, I mean, we've just got the first bus in my village for many years, and that is through HVCA. So I think that, yeah, I think perhaps there is a way in which the borough could get not more involved, actually, because I think the officers are too stretched already. And actually, what I was originally going to say, rather than responding to Jill, was to do that. Yeah. So I think, you know, it's more just knowing what's going on and supporting people as councillors, I think. But what I was going to make two more comments. One is, I don't know why you didn't have one of those stars against finance right at the beginning, Gillian, because
I didn't want to go for a full house. I didn't want to be cocky.
I just think that, you know, sometimes when I'm in finance meetings, climate change and nature seem to be so peripheral. I think that, you know, if you talk to people one-to-one, they say yes, yes, but sometimes I do wonder. In fact, I had a little thing yesterday about climate change risk, actually, which I think was not highlighted enough. Yeah, so I didn't know. But the other thing is the plan for nature. I mean, it is really good. It's fantastically detailed. I think it answers some of the questions that you were bringing up, actually, about, you know, where we can both enhance nature and possibly even have biodiversity net gain on our sites. But I'm a bit worried about the process. So I suppose this is a question. If suddenly there was some
if you
funding,
can save your thoughts on that, because we have got the plan for nature as the next agenda item.
Sorry, haven't read the agenda properly. Okay, yep.
Okay, any more questions or comments for Gillian?
Yeah. So I was just going to finish off with one little bit, if that's okay. So within the plan, obviously, as I was saying, I put in recommendations. What I would really like to do this year is to review the plans, and with that, review the targets and performance indicators as well. I think that the plan is huge, and like everybody has highlighted before, there's a lot to do, and it's whether we pick focus areas to drill down on and do really well, or we just kind of try and do everything a little bit kind of here and there. And so it's trying to be a bit smarter about how we use our limited resources. But I think the most important bit that we need to think about is reviewing the targets, which will come on. I've got a bit to talk about later, but so I think that we need to try and do that this year. So that's what would like to put as my recommendations in the report. That's me done.
And for those that were at Corporate Select last night, that does partly fit into the sort of the performance review item that we had on the agenda, because one of the particular issues around climate change to a certain extent is that have we got the right targets in the right places to be able to measure performance effectively on it, which I'm not entirely sure from the measures that we're watching at the moment we necessarily have. Okay, any further comments or questions for Gillian? Simon.
Yeah, just a quick one, Jay. It's a request really rather than a question. It's a bit hard to concentrate on the fly on slides with just seeing straight away here now. I would prefer to have papers in advance in future if possible. I don't know why we don't have any for this meeting for any of the agenda items. Because if we're going to be comprehensive and strategic, I need to be able to have to look at what we're talking about much quicker than on the fly, and with writing that's about this big on the iPad. So and the second point is, can we therefore get that deck back on email or something, so we can have a look at it, and certainly not making any decisions based on a presentation which we're looking at straight away, because we really should be getting papers in advance.
Yeah, I had COVID last week, so I was off. So I apologise for it being last minute. Otherwise, it would have been with you. But that's my fault. Well, it's whoever gave me COVID's fault. So apologies. But yes, point taken.
Okay, Jean.
I was just going to mention that, and I just wanted to say that I think it's a very comprehensive, and she's produced that Gillian's produced this report.
I was going to say, essentially, the aim of the presentation tonight was to prepare us for the draft annual report,
Yeah.
which will be getting circulated in the near future once the last of the figures and information is coming from the various other services. So that'll be circulated in the near future. Okay, if there's nothing further on the draft annual report, we'll move on then to the Plan for Nature consultation, which I would hope at least that most members have seen the emails about, but Katie's going to tell us more.
Thanks. Evening, everyone. It's just a brief update from me tonight on the Plan for Nature stuff, so I'll just share my screen now. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Yep. So the Plan for Nature, High Peak Plan for Nature consultation is now live. So I just wanted to provide a little update on that tonight. So just as a quick reminder, the Plan for Nature was developed in collaboration with the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and other stakeholders. It provides essentially a review of sort of the existing state of nature across the High Peak and provides a number of recommendations as to where the council should sort of focus their kind of efforts and resources to support nature's recovery. So it's now got to the stage where we're running a public consultation on the draft plan. And the purpose of the consultation is to sort of gather feedback on some kind of key points really before we're able to go away and finalise and actually get the plan published and subsequently start delivering it. So we've decided to do an online consultation, but for those interested, we've also got hard copies available at the Buxton Town Hall and also Glossop Town Hall, just to ensure we're sort of covering off everything from like an accessibility point of view. But for most people, the best place to go will be this sort of web link here, which we'll try and get shared with the draft minutes for this meeting. So the latest version of the plan is available on this web page, consultation page on the High Peak website. And then we're wanting people really to just sort of take a look through the draft plan and then complete this online survey, which is again linked via this web page. So if sort of councillors could sort of share with, you know, people or groups, potential stakeholders I think might be interested in their ward, and obviously comments from councillors as well, much appreciated. That would be fantastic. And again, just if people could ensure that any responses are submitted via this sort of route and the online survey or alternatively the hard copies in the town hall, that'd be fantastic. It just ensures that all the sort of responses get properly logged and processed with people being on annual leave at various different points, saves emails getting lost. So running the consultation up until the 19th of August, so got just over a month really to provide any kind of sort of blast points and comments on the Plan for Nature, after which point we'll then be going back and working with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust to get the plan properly finalised and published. So that's it from me on the public consultation for the Plan for Nature, but if anyone's got any more general questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Okay, thanks, Katie. We start off with Joanna.
Yes, no, I was just thinking, I mean, I know that there is a bid being led by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, possibly being put together, but because plans, first of all, they're just plans, and secondly, they quite often take quite a long time to actually finalise. I just wondered if anything was happening about the funding. I think Gillian very briefly referred to possible funding for any of the actions. If anyone was sort of keeping a watch on that. And I was also hoping that if funding does come up, it is more or less in the plan, even if the plan hasn't been finalised, we can take advantage of that because the situation with nature is so desperate.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of in the background, we're keeping track of various different funding streams. Good. And as you mentioned, there's a possible sort of bid going on with some local groups in the background. But yeah, you know, and Gillian and I have discussed like we'd quite like to get some kind of call them shovel ready projects almost scoped out, so that when these sort of short, timescale funding rounds do come, maybe the government funding or whatnot, then we're quite ready to jump on them.
Yep. Good. Can I say something else, Anthony?
Yep.
And this sort of refers a little bit to what Gillian did with all those circles. Which is things like the parks. I mean, I think, Pavilion Gardens perhaps is a bit exceptional because it's a heritage asset that goes with all sorts of other heritage assets. But I think the Plan for Nature does mention the parks, and I just would like to be reassured that the parks staff are aware of things like, planting bedding plants every year is absolutely disastrous for nature, however pretty it might be, and also that they're aware, and also that their engagement is good, so that people don't say things like, where are the pansies?
Yeah. So again, we're sort of still trying to iron out the overall kind of governance structure of the Plan for Nature, but in the background we actually have set up some officer working groups for biodiversity, one of which is with the Parks, Service Commissioning Department. So I've got regular meetings with them in the calendar to kind of, discuss those kind of issues, and also how we can better manage our parks and open spaces for biodiversity and things like mowing and stuff. So it's kind of, over the past sort of few months, it's almost been a bit more of a kind of, I guess, bottom-up approach is probably the term you'd use. But the work has started on an officer level. I think the links, being made, but we do need to iron out the governance on that, really, I think. Do you want to come in on that, Gillian?
Yeah, it was just, I think Jean might mention this. We had a presentation from AES last week, week before, must be the week before. No, it was last week. And they're actually doing loads of stuff with community groups and making bird boxes, and they've got a ranger in Whaley Bridge Park. And we didn't know anything about it, so that there's an issue that we're not connecting well there, and we flagged that with them. So we hope to make that better, and so they know what we're doing and we know what they're doing, and we can all be a bit more joined up as well.
Yeah, I think it definitely links back, like I said, with that diagram. It's ensuring that climate and also biodiversity can sort of considered across the whole of the council's operations, and we're not working in silo. I think is going to be key, to delivering the Plan for Nature and meeting the targets in that, but then obviously delivering on the climate change plan as well and meeting the targets within that. It's not going to work otherwise, I don't think.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Joanna. Jenny.
Hi, thank you for the plan. I learned so much from reading it. Just a quick question about local nature reserves, because I noticed that you say quite a few of them are unfavourable. So I don't know if you could explain a little bit more about that. So, for example, we've got one in New Mills, Mousley Bottom, and I just wonder, is there anything that local groups could do to make it favourable, or am I misunderstanding what you mean by that?
Yeah, so it wasn't me who wrote the plan. It was a lady from the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust called Holly Fisher. But I think with the nature reserves, in terms of like the condition of them, I think it kind of depends what category they put them in. But I believe it's the Wildlife Trust who come out and do the surveying of like the quality of the sites. But I think there's definitely scope there for, identifying which sites and sort of which areas across the High Peak are actually in a poorer quality than we'd like to be. And I definitely see there being scope there for, working with community groups and on nice sort of local projects to try and get more sites in a favourable condition. So I think that's definitely something we should be exploring.
Okay. And then New Mills Town Council are the ones that are in control of lots of our sort of green spaces. So, I guess there does need to be sort of dialogue there, which Simon and I, well, particularly Simon, can sort of help facilitate, because we get praised by it for our bedding plants a lot, which I didn't even know were bad, I must admit. So it's things like that I suppose we all need educating about.
Yeah, and I think again, just working with town and parish councils is going to be key. I mean, I've made sure to share the link to the consultation with all the town and parish councils. But again, if councillors could sort of, you know, I guess share this consultation link widely in the ward, it just means that when we getting the plan finalised, it's, you know, representative of everyone's views and people are sort of aware of what it is, and then we can hit the ground running once we actually get it published in terms of kicking off various project strands.
Just on to reinforce Jenny's point there, because I sit on New Mills Town Council as well as Highpeak Borough Council, and we do have now a dedicated Parks and Open Spaces committee, and certainly this has been sort of circulated internally, but officers and others would be more than welcome to come and visit and join in those meetings where required and where needed, and open that dialogue and keep that dialogue going, because I think it's very important, because as Jenny says, Mousley Bottom, for example, and lots of areas in New Mills are maintained by the town council, and you know, it's certainly things that we need to be continuing the dialogue on, really, going forward.
Agree.
Gillian, do you want to come in on this point, or can I move on to Jill?
Me or Gillian Scott?
Gillian Wright.
Yes. I just wanted to sort of just say that the plan is not set in stone, and that if you do identify other sites that aren't in there, it doesn't mean that they're never going to get looked at. It's very much a working document. These are recommendations. It's not fixed. So if you do have a site like that that you think would benefit, then there's absolutely no harm in us coming to look at it. I think some of the way that they assessed it was how much uplift you could give it from, you know, not being good. So things like, you know, ancient woodland, we're not that interested. Well, we are interested, obviously, but we're not going to do any work there because it's performing perfectly on its own. So I think that was just to say that. So thanks.
Okay. Hayfield, Jill.
Hayfield, Jill, yeah. Thank you. I really love the Plan for Nature, I do. One thing that bothers me, and I know Anthony's probably going to give a similar answer to what he gave before, but I don't know how much you do work with the Countryside Rangers, because there's like one left, Derbyshire Countryside Rangers. They've been cut, and their work is absolutely vital. So a lot of the work that we're going to do is very dependent on what's happening at county level. And I know, Anthony, you said we sometimes have a good relationship with them, we sometimes don't, but I kind of feel that in that particular area, and you mentioned ancient woodland, we've got, Gillia, we've got the Set Valley Trail, which is an area of ancient woodland that's been managed by the Countryside Rangers. It no longer will be. And so, yes, of course, you've got community groups, but it's kind of really not enough to be able to rely on countryside groups. And also the expertise is going. That bothers me just as much as the personnel not being in place. So are there any plans for training for people, you know, I don't know, links with Buxton Elite College, I don't know who with, but what plans are there to train people in, for want of a better word, countryside science, countryside craft, tree management, etc.? Because it's really, really important that if we've got a 40-year vision, which I think is what it is, that we actually have people there that have the skills and expertise. So the question is really two questions, I suppose. How are we going to manage with only one Countryside Ranger? And also, what plans are there for training people?
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm not sure I've actually linked up with the Countryside Range yet, but we're obviously working quite closely with the County Council on the local nature recovery strategy, which this plan is kind of feeding into the evidence base for that, really. But I think in terms of like wider training, that's probably something we should be exploring. I know that Derbyshire Wildlife Trust have quite a few nice kind of opportunities, you know, for running those kind of skills training courses. I guess it's just working out what we want, where we want to take that, really. Like, yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it, really, when there's limited, you know, basically limited funding and limited people. But that's just one idea I've just thought in my head then. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gillian. Joanna.
Yeah, I just wanted, I mean, obviously this is High Peak Borough Council, but we are partnering with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust on various things. So there's a guy called George Jones at Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, who's, I think he's Wilder Communities Officer, is his name, but he's a Communities Engagement Officer, and I've just put his email in the chat for, you know, I did that actually in response to New Mills, but he might be able to help with other places as well. He's very keen. So, yeah.
We have actually met with George and a few different other communication teams. So I think they're going to continue to be involved as we evolve the plan. So yeah, he is great though. He is very good.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if people are involved in community groups, he might be able to help them.
And I think that's obviously if you know, how many years ago we might have had a certain number of rangers, and it sounds like that number's gone down quite significantly, and maybe that is the sort of route we have to explore, is actually trying to, you know, support local people and local groups with, you know, getting training, and maybe that's something we can think about when we've sort of, you know, hopefully got a budget or not for delivering on the plan for nature, is can we support local groups with training to, you know, improve their skill sets and do the work that like ranger kind of work possibly.
We could, sorry, I'm just interrupted. We could add that to the community nature and community climate fund. We could maybe see if there's a provider for that, and maybe try and link that in. We could use that for, anyway, we can have a think about that.
Yep. Okay, Jean.
Yes, possibly the UK SPF fund could help with that training. I'm also wondering about the Peak Park Rangers, because obviously they need to link in with everything as well. And if perhaps, I'm not sure, with New Mills Parks, the maintenance, the people, how many staff are there that do that, the maintenance in the New Mills Parks, and perhaps they would like to produce a park strategy in the same way that we've got them for the High Peak Parks now. If we could we could liaise with them on that, in that respect.
There's 4 park staff whose job is to, I think one is currently on elected duties because of a health issue, but you know, there are 4 of them there, I think. But it's certainly something I'll pass on.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many of the other parish councils actually manage different parks.
It's a mixed sort of bag across the borough. I think it's mainly sort of New Mills and Chapel that have got their own staff for the parks. There's a couple of them that have either some part-time staff or they work with us via AES. So like Charlesworth, for example, their parks maintenance is done by AES sort of on their behalf. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed bag depending on where you are in the borough.
It certainly needs consultation with those groups, as well as all the sustainable groups that we have as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, have we got any further comments or questions? Just note the one from Madeline in the chat, just around sort of, there did used to be conservation and countryside courses offered in Buxton, but those have now been moved to Ilkeston, which is a slight change from the norm with the university at the moment, which is usually sending everything back to Derby. So it's not quite as far away, but not far short. Okay, I can't see any further hands. So thanks for the update, Katie. And if folk can sort of circulate, I know the council social media team are sending out posts on a sort of a regular basis, just alerting folks to the fact that the consultation's on, and if you may be able to sort of retweet some of those. But Katie's also put the link to the page in the chat. Okay, we shall move on again then to an update around the UK climate scorecards from Gillian.
So this is an activity that is imposed on us by some very well-meaning people. The methodology in the score, I think, is quite flawed. But Jean and I and Joanna were discussing whether it was worth just looking at some of the actions to see where we might want to focus some of our efforts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and show you. I'm not. Hang on, sorry, user error. Ooh. Right, we'll try this again. Oh no, hang on. Right, I'm going to share my screen. It'll go back a bit, but you just have to wait. Come on. Sorry. There's something strange when I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, go away. Ooh. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Right, I'll try this a different way. Right. This is very slick. So I'm going to share again. So this organization, basically, they scour our website and then they send us in freedom of information requests on for certain things. And then what they do is, depending on what our answer is and how well we can evidence it, they give us a score. And it's not worked. High Peak. So we've got 22% in this one. I think the previous scorecard we had 39%, but the methodology is different, so they change the methodology every time because you're meant to be making progress. And what it does basically is it's got these. Can everybody see this? Okay, I appreciate, Simon, you're on an iPad, so it might be quite small. So they have these different categories and they sort of score your different activities within it. And then it will tell you over here how many councils got full marks for this. So, for example, have we completed extensive retrofit work on any significant building to make them low carbon? And when we scored this, we didn't have anything. So now obviously we've got the leisure centre, so that would hopefully give us some points there. So what basically I sent in evidence for a lot of these. Some of it they didn't accept, some they did. So what we were thinking at some point is if we wanted to have, I don't know, a workshop, a session, like sort of looking at all these, because there's obviously far too many to go through on a small screen tonight anyway. But maybe it would be worth having a look to see where the quick wins are, where there are things that we don't want to do, we're not interested, where's the things that we think we should look at. I know, Jean, you've been through all of these quite closely as well, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or have I got that right?
Well, I did produce a spreadsheet of them all,
yeah,
which I've passed around to the different departments.
Yeah, I've got it in the background, but I didn't think you'd want me to show it publicly.
No, okay. But
it names
yeah.
you shame some people.
It is separated into the different areas, but I think although not everything, there are useful things that we could pick up on and do on it. I've not looked at it for a while actually, so
yeah. I mean, I suppose a different way to look at it was maybe if we took it to the Alliance management team and went through it with them to see, and then we brought it to you. Maybe that would be a more efficient way to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tool that we could use basically. I wouldn't get too hung up with the actual score, but it's a kind of a bit of a checklist of making sure you're considering things really. I mean, it's got some things in it that, like food and waste. We don't buy any food as a council really. Occasional biscuit at a meeting, but you know, we usually bring our own. You know. So do you have a sustainable food strategy? Well, no, because we don't buy any. Yeah. So yeah, it was just to see if people thought that was something that we could do, or you know, do we not really care? Nobody's. Yeah, they do this exercise with universities as a league table called People and Planet, and they've done it for quite a long time. This is not a league table; it's a scorecard. We're not the lowest in Derbyshire, so that's good. So any thoughts? Or should, if I send, well, the link will be in that presentation when it gets sent round. So if people want to have a play and see what they think about it, maybe that's the best way to do it.
Or you don't want to share the spreadsheet that I did?
And well, I can. You want me to share it now on the screen?
Well, I suppose
I think if it's a spreadsheet, that's probably one better for circulating round to folk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was trying to get the different departments to fill it in. So
Well,
that was what.
Shall I take that as an action to chase them up, and then we'll circulate it once they've come back with some more. There is a new methodology for the next round, so Katie and I are going to sit and go through that probably next week. So it might be worth including, if there's any additional questions, doing that now so we can gather the evidence. Because part of the problem with this is, although we were doing things, so for example, the not using glyphosate in parks, we didn't have any evidence online anywhere that said we were doing that. So I couldn't evidence it, even though I know that that's our policy.
Yeah.
So since I've spoken to the comms team and the other teams to say, make sure if you do a press release, you mention climate change, you mention nature, and make sure we've got these good news stories published somewhere.
This is the problem, because it was done by volunteers, I think, that then they just searched through the websites or made freedom of information requests.
We did, yeah, that's correct, yeah. And we did have a right to reply, which I did, but which I've also got a spreadsheet for. So anyway, okay, so if I chase up on that and try and get people to respond, and then we'll fill it in a bit better and we'll circulate it. Is that what we're going to do? Yeah.
I think if we pick out the certain things that we think we can do that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, I'll colour code them or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Joanne,
any other comments or questions? Start off with Joanne.
Joanna, yeah, I'm just thinking that, I mean, there's been talk about priorities, and Gillian, I mean, we haven't actually answered this question, but Gillian did bring out the question, do we want to be sort of just broad-based, doing a bit here, a bit there, or do we want to concentrate on what we can really do in terms of climate change and biodiversity? So I wonder if this is sort of, if we need to do that first and then go back to the scorecard, because it's external and we know that it's not brilliant. And although it's very interesting and, well, it's quite important that we look at it, partly just so the council, you know, is engaging with external things and looks okay. I just feel as if we looked at it and then prioritised on the basis of the scorecard in some way, it's doing it kind of the wrong way round.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think, to be honest, when the climate change plan, I know that was developed before I was in post, but I think they tried to align a lot of the actions to what they thought was going to be in this scorecard. And I'm not aware of anybody contacting the council about the scorecards. There was one of the groups asked me about it,
but you know, I just said, well, I don't think it's very good. You know, it's a good checklist, but this actual score is meaningless. I just wanted to use it as a nudge, really, you know, to pick out the best things.
Internally, that's
yeah.
But I don't think it should be used for decision making. And actually, I wonder how many people see it, apart from people who get hundreds of emails in their inbox every week from various climate related things.
Yeah.
I think as well, one of the challenges of sort of trying to make more use of it on a more regular basis is each year they've done it so far, it's been a different methodology in some way, shape or form. So there's very little consistency as to what it's measuring or what it's not measuring. I think particularly with the last year's one, there was a number of elements sort of flagged up that were specifically things that sort of the only county or authorities with particular responsibilities would do, yet we still got scored down for not having carried out any of those responsibilities, even though they're not our responsibilities to carry out. So we wouldn't have the plans or policies in place for those.
Unfortunately, the auditor picked up on it, didn't?
Yeah, that's true. So I suppose we have to do something, but then maybe we could sort of look at our plan and say, well, we're concentrating on this bit because it's in our plan for the auditors.
Okay. Thanks.
Angela.
Hello there, everybody. I was just wondering, as regards Joanna's thing about how we're going to decide on whether we focus on certain issues that we're going to concentrate on, or whether we're going to do things more generally, and how we're going to decide, and is it important to decide more quickly now, or, you know, have an arrangement?
I think probably the best approach for that is there will be a fully documented annual report that will come through from Gillian, hopefully for the next meeting, if not for the one after that. And as Gillian mentioned, that'll contain some recommendations to give us a bit of a focus. And I think once we've got those, we can then sort of start to look at what can be the priority for, you know, essentially for the forthcoming year.
Right. Yep, that's great.
In terms of that, it'll give us some pointers, as particular bits to focus on.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Any other comments, questions, or shall we move on?
Move progress, Chair.
We shall move on then to agenda item 8, which is an AES update from Jean. It's Legacy Hand, she just spoke. Okay, Jean.
Sorry. I could share a PDF or just talk to you about it, because actually Gillian covered quite a few of the things in her presentation at the beginning. We had a specific meeting with AES last week on climate change. And they told us a lot of the things that they've been doing and plan to do. On the carbon neutrality side, it's split into several areas. So we've got fleet decarbonisation, public open and green space management, waste minimisation and education, the simpler recycling, depot reorganisation, and a summary at the end. On the emissions from the fleet, High Peak Borough Council has actually produced in 22-23 379.1 tonnes of CO2. This is just from the fleet, whereas Staffordshire Moorlands only produced 167.27 tonnes of CO2, and the reason for that was that they were using the hydrogenated vegetable oil, which is basically recycled vegetable oil, and so that it gives more less emissions. Unfortunately, the price of that became much too expensive against diesel, so they stopped that trial in October 23. Right, as Gillian said, the age that our fleet is basically only kept for a certain number of years. So we have, usually for the refuse wagons, they're kept for 7 years. We've got a number of wagons that are coming up to they've only got 2 years left. Now they've been using, they had two vehicles that could use hydrogen as a fuel, although they could use diesel as well. And they had a catalyzer on site which would produce 14 kilograms of hydrogen a day. One vehicle takes 6 kilograms for a day. So that would have been great. Unfortunately, the catalyzer has not worked properly, and they couldn't get it certified. So they've had to stall on that. Although it would have been a great way to reduce our carbon emissions. They're talking about the electric vehicles. They did run a trial of an electric vehicle in High Peak, and it was found that it couldn't complete a full day because of the hills, basically. So that they've also trialed a compressed natural gas cage tipper that's been used for helping on the carbon emissions. Then they're also educating the drivers to drive in a more efficient manner, which has improved, and it's improved the miles per gallon. On the waste side, to say that they've used the HVO trials. Unfortunately, it obviously helps with carbon emissions and air quality. Oops, just lost it. They've also been using battery-operated ride-on mowers for the ground maintenance. The standard of cut wasn't very good, but and they couldn't complete a full day's work, so that trial has not been successful. They use battery handheld machinery, things like strimmers and leaf blowers, hedge cutters, and this was sort of partly successful, but they're not really coping with a full day's work either. They require up to 4 batteries for large jobs. They have an employee e-bike and electric car charging facilities on site at Anster. They obviously in High Peak, we stopped using glyphosate when we took over the council in 2019 for our own open spaces and parks, etc. They haven't actually done this yet in Staffordshire Moorlands, from what I understand, but they are reducing mowing. They've been planting orchards. We have had these test sites for different, for basically reducing mowing, not mowing for the whole of the season. They've also, on the sustainable bedding side, they're reducing the annual plants that are being planted in places like roundabouts and that kind of thing. It's being reduced all the time, and these are bad because at the moment their suppliers are using peat-based compost, or at least partially peat-based, where they plant their own plants, they never use the peat, but where they're buying in these bedding plants, then that is where at the moment the peat is part of the compost. Yeah, as Gillian said, they've been putting bug hotels in places, in volunteer networks. The education, I don't know whether any of you saw the refuse wagon that was used as a classroom. That's been around a lot of the schools in High Peak, and also guide companies, people like that. They've taken them to the Trans Buxton climate change event that was done for children. It's been done for the last 2 years. They're planning to do another one in November. They've used a virtual tour of an MRF in their education, and that really went down well with the children. They've had trials with recycling litter bins in some of the parks, although that's not gone down. They got a bit too much contamination from those sort of things. As Gillian said, they've been tackling contamination, but they've produced a new tag that hang on to the bin, which they say is better, that it doesn't, makes people look at it more. But although from what I understand, somebody did go around pulling all these off in one area and just throwing them on the ground. The simpler recycling, there was a report on that in the Community Select Committee. There was a bit of confusion there, because in the government scheme, they specify that there are 6 channels of recycling to be collected, and the confusion was that people thought that they had to be actually separated, but we don't have to separate them. We still carry on the way we are now, which is combining all the recyclate in one container. As we said, they will have to have weekly collections of food waste. There is a debate as to whether we may still be able to carry on using our merged green waste and food waste. Otherwise, we have to buy new caddies, kitchen caddies and curbside caddies, this kind of thing. I think in the Community Select meeting, they went through all the dates where the changes are happening for that. The depots, we've had a problem in that the Glossop depot was closed, and that has caused extra carbon emissions because they've had to do much more travelling. Everything has been brought to Buxton. So they've had problems with that, but we're looking at a new site for a new larger depot. Right, I don't know. Has anyone got any questions on this?
Okay, any questions for Jean, anyone? I'm not seeing any hands. So in that case, Jean, thanks for the update. There are a couple of bits that will go back through to Community Select, particularly as some of the further details are worked out, particularly around the changes to the waste collection arrangements. And I think, Jean, if I recall correctly, there's also a report due to Community Select on changes to how they're going to be mowing some of the verges and some of the open spaces, and I think that's due to go to the next Community Select.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case then, there are no hands showing, so we'll move to our final agenda item for tonight, which is a targets review discussion. And I understand David is starting us off with this, but it may well be Gillian.
It's David has sent his apologies, so I'm afraid it's me again.
Okay.
Sorry. So this I sort of brought this up a little bit earlier. But this is something that we need to really get our heads around, I think, this year. So at the moment, our targets are net zero for our operations as a council and the borough by 2030. We think we have a chance of doing the operations, bearing in mind what Jean's just talked about and I talked about earlier about things like the fleet, making sure that our new head of assets and knows that they're looking for decarbonising options for our assets as well. So, and being honest about where we are with that and what we need to do, and if we're not going to make it, I think we need to just be open. In terms of the borough, there's absolutely no way you'd get to net zero by 2030. The national target is 2050. Just to give you a couple of things that will happen after 2030 is that the legislation for gas boilers being obsolete will be 2035. So you can't install them from next year, I think, but they're hoping by 2035, most of them will be swapped out. There'll be no new fossil fuel cars after 2035. There'll still be the second-hand market for as long as that it lasts as well. We have the Peak Cluster project, which I know they've not been present here yet, but they are coming later this year. So that's a carbon capture project working with 5 quarries here and in Staffordshire Moorlands to basically capture the carbon emissions from the process of making the cement. So it's not necessarily about the energy they use, it's actually the chemical process. But they'll come and present on that. But that will reduce our borough emissions significantly because that is our biggest emitter. It makes us look far worse than any other borough in the country, pretty much. So just considering all those things, I would like to put in the annual report that this year that we review that. So I just think that I just want to put those thoughts on the table so that we can start processing how that might be for the group, for the council. Yeah, so it's just to kind of think about how we're going to do that and what we want to do with it strategically.
Okay, thanks, Gillian.
That's David finished.
So essentially the proposal is that as part of the annual report, we'll have a particular update starting to look at some of those bigger targets within sort of the climate change process, but we'll also sort of set out a process to be able to review those other targets so that we can at least start to get a better handle on what are the performance measures we're looking at to try and monitor to make sure we're making progress with the various plans.
Yeah, I think we talked previously about combining the part 1 and part 2, but actually if we want to split the targets, we probably want to keep them separate as well. So it's kind of that, how do we want it to be as a process? How do we want to govern it?
Okay, so any comments or questions? I'm seeing no hands, so in that case then we can free you all to enjoy the rest of your evening. Just as a heads up in terms of sort of some future meeting dates, the September and October meetings are fairly close together in terms of the timing, so it's possible that we may look to cancel one of those to try and make sure we've got sufficient both paperwork, etc., and reports to be able to focus on one particular meeting. But we'll confirm that via the Democratic Services team once that's arranged. Okay, in that case then, thank you all for your attendance and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay, Anthony.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.